Hello, everyone, and you're all very welcome to our webinar, our monthly webinar on a conversation around men's mental health in partnership with Mental Health Ireland. And as always, I just want to thank Mental Health Ireland for the collaboration with this webinar series. And so my name is Cillian, and I am the Peer Education Training and Development Officer with Midwest ARIES. And today's webinar is going to be a great conversation. And I suppose it's a really important topic we'll be talking about today. And we hope to explore and discuss the associated stigma men can often feel about speaking up. And I do feel there's a lot more awareness around this topic now. And hopefully we'll be able to speak about, I suppose, the challenges that men can often face in asking for help and support. And hopefully we'll have a great open discussion over the next hour throughout the webinar. So do stick around till the very end. Before I begin, just a little bit on Midwest ARIES. If you're tuning into these webinars for the very first time, we are the Midwest Recovery Education Service, and we cover the Midwest region in Clare, Limerick, and North Tipperary. We currently run workshops online and face-to-face in those communities, and I'll have further information on all the workshops that we host in the community and online towards the very end as well. So just a bit on housekeeping for the webinar as well. It'll be an hour duration, and it'll be a panel discussion. There'll be plenty of time for discussion. And any questions that come in throughout the Q&A function, we'll answer as we go, and we'll be guided by these questions as well throughout the webinar. So just so you know, with the Q&A button at the end of your screen, if you're on a laptop or a phone, if you want to preload some questions in there as we go, or even now at the moment, and we'll try and get to them throughout the webinar. That would be great. Also, this webinar is recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. And this will be also on our Spotify, Anchor FM Wellness Panel podcast as well. So you can access this at a later stage as well. We'll finish with a guided meditation on building resilience, and hopefully you'll enjoy that, because we always finish the webinars with a guided meditation, and they're always great to kind of bring us back into the present moment again. So that's all of the kind of information and the housekeeping. So I'd like to invite the panelists to turn on their cameras and unmute. So I'm joined by Mike, Bill, Ian, and Mick as well from for the duration of this webinar panel as well. So I'd like to just, I suppose, do a round of introductions, if that's okay. And Mike, I might start with yourself, Mike O'Neill. Thanks a million.
Yeah, thanks very much, Cillian. Mike O'Neill, I'm the manager with Midwest ARIES, and again, in partnership with Mental Health Ireland, we host these monthly webinars. And again, the topic is something to do with mental health. Thanks, Cillian.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Mike. Great to have you here. Ian, I might start or go to yourself next. Perfect.
No problem. So hi everyone, I'm Ian Hackett. I'm the manager here at Limerick Mental Health Association, an umbrella organisation of Mental Health Ireland.
Great stuff, Ian. Thanks a million. Appreciate it. Bill, I might come to yourself next just for an introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Cillian. Bill Vaughan, and I'm up in Donegal. I would work with Mental Health Ireland as a development officer up in Donegal, supporting mental health associations and promoting mental health through community groups, workshops, linking with HSE and national campaigns as well. Mostly is what I would do.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Bill. Great to have you here. And Mick, yourself, Mick.
Hi all, and apologies, it took me a little bit of time to get in, but I managed to get here eventually. Mick Collins, I work for the HSE and I'm a resource officer in suicide prevention. I work in the Office for Suicide Prevention, and I'm delighted to be here to be able to join in this, I think, really important conversation in relation to men's mental health.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Mick. It's great to have you here as well to get your experiences. So that's brilliant. So I suppose we'll start off with the first question. And again, just for the attendees, if you have any questions throughout, please put them into the Q&A button at the end of your screen as well. So I'll start with the first question. And I suppose we always start with a kind of broad question just to get ourselves thinking. So the question is, what is men's mental health and is it different? So, Mike, I always start with yourself first. If you want to throw you under the bus there, if that's okay. Thanks a million.
Yeah, it's actually a difficult question, because whether you're a man or a woman, I think everybody has mental health. And I suppose it comes down to some people have better skills or resources or resilience, in managing their mental health. But I suppose maybe because men have or would have traditionally had different perceived roles in society, about being the old model of what was the standard family where you had a man and a woman. But I suppose like society has evolved and changed now in so many ways. You know, and a lot of people like say, well, oh, this is the reason why men are struggling with mental health. But I don't know, because again, I can't think of, I've had experiences of mental health challenges, and that's where I would come at it from. So, well, is it different? Whether just because I'm a man, is that just, does that make it different? I honestly don't know. You know, so I'll be interested to get this conversation going to see what everybody else has to say. Thanks, Cillian.
Lovely. Thanks a million, Mike. Ian, I might come to yourself just with any additional thoughts on the question. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Cillian. I suppose, what is mental health? I suppose we look back at it, whether it's good or bad mental health. I suppose you're looking there coming from what Mike was saying with the whole perceived male mental health stigma around it. I've always looked back in relation to, I suppose, my own experience. Being male, being a man, being everything else, you never spoke up about your mental health. You just, I suppose, dealt with it and got over it. But as Mike was saying, things are changing now. People are coming out to speak a bit more in relation to it. Again, the difference, how do you ever see, it brings me back to that, I suppose, I'm being a bit more modern here now for some people, the YouTube video or the TikTok video that's going around, and you see there's a man comes up with a question and goes, if you had a problem with your mental health, who would you talk to? And it goes through 30 to 40 different men, and each one of them come up with their own version of saying no one, nada, absolutely no one. It kind of goes back to that stigma of, should men talk about their mental health, or should they be the strong, quiet type that just deals with it and gets on? Now, obviously, coming from this profession, I would have been one of those up to last year. Mike, keep laughing there. I would have been one of those up to last year, but starting with this new job, you can see it's important to get out there and talk for everyone, and especially men. We find, I suppose I'm going slightly off topic, we find that we have a lot of men, rural men, that are being isolated, I suppose, that don't talk about their mental health, but they're slowly starting to open up, phone calls, looking to get out there and socially interact. But I suppose, again, it goes around the stigma. A man shouldn't talk about his mental health. That needs to be got rid of. Everyone, male, female, no matter who you are, should get out and talk about whatever issues, whether you think it might be a massive thing. It could be something small once you start talking and realise it's not as big as you think. Or else, if it is, you definitely need to talk to someone and get some support.
Excellent. Excellent. Great stuff. Thanks for those insights. Bill, I might come to yourself next, if that's okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna lob a grenade in here and go with as if all the men in Ireland asked me to answer for them here now, I would say to that question, what is mental health? Who cares? Because that seems to be the message I get when I'm going around trying to get men to come to my workshops on mental health. Anything on mental health. If I was to kind of put down percentage-wise the split between male and females that attend general workshops on mental health for me, I'm not joking. It would be about 90% over the years female. So to me, then that that indicates that women are more interested and passionate to know about their mental health, or mental health in general, or something around mental health. Whereas men's attitude is, fuck this, I'm going to stay at home and watch the Champions League. Let the dice roll the way they're going to dice, or the way they're going to roll, let them roll. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, and when you're working in the field, for us, the danger is that we get into the role of trying to tell men what they should and shouldn't do. And none of us like to be told what we should and shouldn't do, So it's fascinating. That question alone actually brings up so much, even listening to the two lads there before me. It depends what angle we take it. Or if we talk, I could come at it from public health and say, oh yes, men's health is very costly to the country. So it's all our responsibility. If you look at suicide rates, if you look at men in hospital with obesity, with pulmonary disease, with stress, and all of these, if men took more responsibility at personal level for them, it would save the country a fortune. So we do need to get a big stick out and start beating them over the head till they come to these meetings. And I know that's not going to work. But that's why I love working in this field, because again, you know, I would be one of those men, only for I had bother with mental health issues. So I was forced to pay attention because I needed answers to try to figure out my problems. But I think that's what happens. Unless this kind of crisis comes into a man's life where he has to really ask the big hard questions in the mental health field, as well as the philosophical, spiritual field, where we tend more to just float along and let other people tell us what to do, rather than the female side of things. They're naturally more organizers, and naturally, I think, intuitive into looking inside and saying, yeah, what's all this about? Who am I? What's going on here? How do I look after myself? Our report would read, could do much better in this area, has great potential, but just isn't working hard enough. If this was a parent teacher meeting, that's what I'd be saying. Thanks, Cillian.
Brilliant, Bill. Thanks a million for all that. That's great. Finally, Mick, you might come to yourself on the question. Do you have any additional thoughts on it, or any thoughts even on what Mike, Ian, or Bill have mentioned as well? Thanks a million.
Yeah, interesting question and interesting different points of view from the lads just in relation to it. Just a couple of general points. I mean, mental health, we all have it. Some of us are luckier than others that we can maintain reasonably good health. I mean, it's very much part of who we are as well in terms of physical health, medical well-being, mental health. They're all part of what we've got to manage on an ongoing basis. And I do think there's a historical point to it, like the lads raised, that we haven't traditionally been very good at putting our hand up and coming forward and asking for support, asking for help. We traditionally have been more the doers. But saying that, I mean, in a lot of my working career, I've worked in more female-orientated teams than male teams, you know. So I've spent a lot of time with female colleagues, you know, and I suppose you notice different things about them in terms of how they engage and how they interact just on a natural basis. You walk into a canteen, you know, that's full of the girls, and there's lots and lots of talk going on, you know, and the conversations that the girls will talk about in comparison to the conversations that we'll talk about are quite different. And I know I'm maybe stereotyping people. I mean, because, you know, we'll be having conversations about the World Cup that's going on at the moment. The girls could be having conversations about the Christmas party and what they might be wearing, but also, you know, how they are checking in with each other as well, and all of that. So I do think it is a big issue, and I suppose one of the areas that I'm really interested in is, because I work in the Office for Suicide Prevention, and we're always, I suppose, concerned about suicide rates, and any suicide is a loss too many, but the rates have historically been and traditionally been 75% male, 25% female, you know, and that's, I suppose, a frightening statistic when you take it to the extreme end of things. Now, that saying that not everyone that takes their own lives has a mental health or a diagnosable mental health issue, but I would perceive that those that do have suffered and struggled with something for a considerable period of time. And I would wonder, you know, if we were better and more able to access what's out there and take a first step to have that initial conversation, would that be, excuse me, a way of, reducing the rates that are currently too high?
Brilliant, brilliant. Thanks for all that, Mick. That's really valuable advice, I think. Would anyone have any thoughts on what the kind of conversation has kind of been so far? Or are you happy enough to, I suppose, go on to the next question?
And I suppose,
yeah,
I think it's just interesting. And again, I'm just looking at the demographic of the people here. There's none of us spring chickens, so again, it would be nice maybe if we had a 20-year-old in this conversation, because we inhabit, a different world, when you have, and there is that different generational thing. And I think some of us do come from that culture, where we need to be macho, you need to be strong, from the past. And that's a very much the traditional role. But I think everybody has highlighted, we're not there yet when you look at the stats that Mick has said. It's just kind of, it is interesting because, again, with the younger people have different challenges. And and like when you look at culture, and there's times that we can all have our strategies and plans and we know what we're doing, but as the saying goes, culture leads strategy for breakfast. And maybe, how do you change the culture and the actions? I know Ian looks as if he's mad to go there, so go ahead.
No, I'm just saying from, I won't mention what, my previous job, I would have had all our own age again. I would have been with those lads. And like you said, the stigma around it, the different cultures. So my age group, the culture would have been, if you were having a bad day, you could see it in the face. There wouldn't be any question of how you're getting on, how's things. They would absolutely tear you apart, having a mess and a joke and a slag, trying to raise the morale and make sure you were okay. And that's how they had the conversation, to see if you were all right, to see how you reacted, because obviously you would have the slag back and whatnot. But then I also had the mix of 18, 19, 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds that would have been in the same job as myself. But we'd always notice if they were having a bad day, they'd sit down in the corner and you would actually hear them. How are you getting on today, Ian? How's things? They'd have the conversation and they'd be a bit more outgoing, I suppose, to talk about it. Whereas my generation, my age group, you wouldn't even say you were stressed. You wouldn't say you had a mental health issue. You just rip each other apart. Just to emphasize on what you were saying there with the age group, Mike.
I think culturally and in certain occupations as well, it's probably not a conversation that happens in tea rooms in terms of how people are doing and that. And I think that's an interesting point as well. There's a number of research pieces that try and look at men in particular occupations, particularly the construction industry, whereby the rates of construction workers in relation to suicide are very high. So it's looking at another opportunity in a particular demographic. And I also think that one of the lads mentioned the isolation and rural isolation for men is a particularly big issue, and that has been highlighted in a number of ways in relation to fearing for their safety in their own rural communities and being very isolated. So there is almost a certain generational thing, but there's also an isolationist piece of that, because the majority of construction, you're with others and you're working with people, and they're not a good group to have those kinds of conversation. And then you have potentially the other side, say the farmers that could be living in isolation in rural areas that don't have that opportunity. So there's a number of different I think areas and factors within this.
It's really good. And just reflecting on kind of what you're saying, it might be a broad question and I might probably come through it towards the end as well. What would be the initial steps to change for any demographic or any age or whatever you kind of feel? Because I think that would be kind of a useful question to be able to start with. What would be the first step really to change the way it is now for things to get better? So I'll let anyone come in there on that if anyone wants any thoughts or wants a second to think about it.
I think Bill was quite honest there when he said, well, I reached a crisis, and I was kind of like, and I had a similar thing as well when I had no awareness. I mean, like at one stage in my life, I was mentally ill until my GB pointed it out, and I was kind of, now it all makes sense. So sometimes it's even to be aware of what you're actually experiencing or what you're going through, whether it is a trauma, it could be a loss of relationship, that stuff that affects us, so sometimes it's kind of even just becoming aware, but I think the isolation piece, I think Mick and Bill mentioned there as well, I think it's really important, because when we look at, right, there is change in roles in society, and that's a challenge in itself. But I think when you look at the model of the men's shed and what that looks like, is whereas, it was the guy who founded that program in Australia, as he said, women support each other face to face, men support each other shoulder to shoulder. And there's something in that. So when you look at what men's stuff they do, so it could be like that, even on a building site, your work is just that presence. It could be at a match. You're all lined up there together. There's something about that collective. Whereas to actually turn around somebody and eyeball somebody and have an open and honest conversation about your feelings, it's a big shift, so there is that, if you take what that man who set up the men's shed on board, yeah, you can see something in it, so it's kind of, but it comes back to Keane, what's the awakening, what's the intervention, rather than going down the rabbit hole of further mental ill health, or potentially suicide as an option, when there is options. It doesn't have to be like that all the time. Thanks, Cillian.
I think
Brilliant.
that's a good point, and I would just maybe go back to a little bit. I think awareness and insight are two huge areas that how do we become aware? We sometimes need to have others to point certain things out to us, what I mean, that might be very obvious to them, but might not be tuned into it for some particular reason, or we may have a blind spot to stuff. So, when you get to a point of self-awareness and you have insight into yourself and insight into what you might be struggling with or what might be going on in your world at a particular time, that's a point when you possibly could make a decision to go and get some support and get help on that. But sometimes it does take some people around us to point out to us that that this is going on, and I've noticed this about you, and you don't seem to be yourself. Starting your conversation with those kinds of observations about changes in behaviors, changes in the things we might do, avoidance of certain situations or certain people, just little things like that. If we can recognize ourselves, it's definitely a step. We're a step on the road. Sometimes we need it to be pointed out to us, almost to get feedback from others about what they've noticed as well. So, partly it's us, and it might be what we might have blind spots, or we might be sort of partially in denial, Many men use alcohol as a way of, dealing with whatever's going on in their worlds and that, somebody might observe, gosh, you're here in the pub a lot, or you're coming to the bottle bank a lot. That's a lot of bottles you're bringing back to the bottle bank. You think, oh gosh, is it? It's those kinds of things, that sometimes you want to have a check on yourself, or get that feedback and use it to reflect.
Excellent, Mike or Mick. Any additional thoughts? Bill, come in there. Yeah,
I picking up there on what Mike was talking about, the awakening coming, and I would love to see it develop more at a younger age, like as was noted already. None of us are in our youthful spring stage of life. But if you think back to then, and anyone listening here now, how many times do you remember having an enthusiastic conversation about mental health in school or at home over the dinner table? It wasn't done, really, or very rarely would you see it done. So how do you expect young male children to go into adulthood and suddenly develop a passion for their mental health and looking after mental health? So, I see the formal education system we have is hugely flawed that way, because it doesn't allow space for being. And like, that's why women have an advantage there. I know I'm speaking generally, but men's makeup is more around the doing, achieving, competitiveness, you know, and exploring. So we need guidance to get in touch with that kind of, let's just call it the feminine side of the male, you know, that we all have anyway. And personally, my own experience, but also what I see now, there's absolutely, or minimal, shall I say, education around that there. You know, if you look at philosophy and its connection with mental health, if you look at spirituality and its connection with mental health, and I mean personal spirituality, there's very little in the time for teachers to explore that with young males growing up. So, you know, they go into adulthood with qualifications and maybe plenty of drive as to what they want to achieve work-wise and stuff like that. But if you look at the statistics around prescription for anxiety, depression, for, you know, self-harm, suicide, domestic violence, you know, those kind of indicators show that, well, whatever about achieving in this world, there's a lot of men in Ireland not really achieving the kind of inner happiness, inner peace, and that's a big shame in my books. And as a country where we're doing a lot, don't get me wrong, I don't want to appear negative in all this. You know, we're in fact, we're one of the forerunners in some ways in mental health in countries in the world. But I mean that kind of taking personal responsibility around exploring mental health and that whole passion around mental health. I think there's a lot could be done on the educational side and within the educational structures of the country.
Excellent, Bill. Ian, I'll just come to yourself because I know we kind of went around about the steps to change.
You're fine, Cillian. Just on what Bill was saying there.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks,
and
Cillian.
Mike and Mick, it's going to be, you're going to need a cultural change, to be honest. Like what the lads were saying, you're going to really need to, and the only way to do a cultural change is to probably start at the primary schools. Whether you're small and you start with a bit of meditation, getting them to speak openly about their feelings and what's wrong, which I believe is happening in some schools, but probably not nationwide. It needs to basically go big or go home is what it needs to do. So like you need to be looking at a cultural change there. So eventually it's not going to happen probably in our lifetime, it might happen, but maybe next generation, if you start hitting the primary schools now, continuing in secondary school, like for instance, with the culture there at the moment, if any of you know the office here where I am, we've no sign over the door. And we have no sign over the door on purpose for a reason, because you see Ian Hackett going into a mental health association, it comes back to the culture and the stigma. Oh, there's Ian going in, there must be something up with him. He's going to a mental health place. People will be reluctant to call to you if they see the sign, whereas if there's no sign, it kind of makes that people more open to call in for a chat and things. So again, going back to culture, you know, the typical Irish, we all love a bit of gossip, we all love a chat. Let's be honest, we're Irish. So that needs to change. We really need to get rid of the stigma and the culture and the way people are talking about mental health. We need to normalise this more than it actually is now. It's getting there, but we just need to progress it and give it a boot further down the road and speed it up, I suppose, if you can understand that, what I'm saying.
That's great, Ian. And I just think,
make a couple of comments?
Of course, Mick. Yeah, of course you can.
The lads were hit on a point in relation to schools, and I think schools are really important, but they would probably say, look, at our role is to educate, you know, but I do think education about how we are. I don't know if it needs to be called anything in particular, but I'm just making a couple of observations. If we were able to start talking to young people about basically helping them to be able to say what they feel. You know, it's a really difficult thing to do. And I think we're probably part of a generation that didn't get that opportunity to just say how you actually are, because we ask each other, you know, how we are, how you doing, how is things, you know, a lot. And the answer you get usually is fine or grand, which all of them mean absolutely nothing. You know, they don't actually say anything about it. But we usually say that because people ask them, do they really want to hear how you are as well? So that's the other thing that people might, if you launched into, well, I'm not having a very good day today and things are really getting top of me, you know, people might then think, oh gosh, I'm not able to respond to that. But just another observation in relation to schools, and schools are often when challenges or difficulties are picked up, first of all, and that's really important, because the earlier things can be picked up, the earlier people can get support, and that there's a greater likelihood, if they get support and the right kind of support earlier on, they're going to have a better outcome. So I mean, that's they're a really important area for that, because teachers will notice, because kids spend, you know, 7 or 8 6 to 8 hours of their waking day in a school environment with other people, with their peers, with the teachers. In national school, it's one teacher that'll be observing one group of kids, you know, and generally, and this is probably something to do with, you know, those that are externalizers and externalize their behaviors by acting outwards, you know, versus the internalizers that keep it all inside and keep it quiet. And, you know, traditionally it's been the boys have been the externalizers, the girls are the internalizers, you know, there's those kinds of things. But I think it's trying to understand what's behind the externalizing behaviors, but also the quiet behaviors, you know, and that does take time to tease that out, because, you know, anybody can be either quiet or boisterous for a particular time, but if it's a persistent pattern in terms of how it's presenting on a regular basis, then that's more of a worry and more of a concern. But even to be able to sort of to say how you are doing, really, you know, are you sad, are you bothered by something, is there something troubling you, those kinds of conversations, starting them young, I think is a really good idea and a really important first step.
That's really good, Mick, and it ties nicely into a question that we have in the Q&A section, so I'm just going to read it out, and anyone can come in on this as well. So, how can you help someone you love that you believe has mental health problems like depression, but that person refuses to go see someone or admit that anything is wrong? So it kind of ties into what you're kind of saying there a couple of moments ago, Mick. So if you want to come in again, or anyone else at all, happy to.
Yeah. I suppose it's something I listen to at home. So I'm going to have to be careful here in the way I say this. But it is, sometimes I have gone home and said, you know, I was talking to somebody today and I was looking for a bit of advice. And what they said was, yada, yada, yada. And then I get back in reply, rather saying, you know, waiting for the response, God, isn't that great? I get, well, I've been telling you that for years, but you don't listen to me, you know. So there's something in that. So it's kind of like, well, if you can't get through, identify the person and ask somebody else, you know, that they're, you know, that they trust, that they're can they give it a go? Because sometimes it was mentioned earlier, we all have our blocks, we have our barriers, you know, and sometimes when we're too close in certain situations as well, you know, the shutters can come down, or I don't want to hear it. So timing can be a massive, you know, issue. We've all mentioned in life, God, when I look at that life-changing moment, you know, or I came up with this, or I was looking for help, and the right person walked in the door, and it's all to do with timing. So in that as well, timing is key as well. So yeah, and I suppose again it's that persistence, you know, because again we all know in work, a present you know, a business plan or a business case, then you get no, and then you get no again, then you get no again, and then you go, and now we're covering a bit of ground, you know. So again, it is that persistence pays off. But again, it's the intervention. That's the piece. If you can identify the intervention, that can be timing or the right person. Yeah, thanks, Cillian.
Brilliant, Mike. Timing and persistence and having that intervention that would be useful for the person. That's really good. Any additional thoughts on that question? Because I think it's a really valuable one that could be helpful for that person that asks?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, but it does highlight the position a lot of people find themselves in if their other halves, partners, etc., are struggling with something and they mightn't realize it or mightn't have that level of insight. So it can be very isolating for the person that's trying to get them some help. So I would add to what Mike said, is that, for example, you know, in a previous role, I worked in CAMS for a long time, and with young people and their families, you know, and there'd often be a battle about trying to get a young person in to see us. But, you know, what I would say to the parents are, you know, in those cases is, well, let's us do a piece of work together if the young person won't come in, and the young person then might see that the parent is engaging in a way, and the young person then might see certain changes in the behaviors of the parent, which can often be hugely influential in terms of how they are. So, and it can often come around that way. And sometimes we would have a referral in relation to a child, and we might never see the child. We would work solely with the parents in that regard. And then you'll have the other side, that you might never hardly meet the parents and work predominantly with the child or the young person, you know. So it's, I think, trying to help get somebody to somewhere sometimes means looking at your own views, your own attitudes, your own things as well, in terms of how the impact of that on you. And if you can gain some more understanding of that as well, because that can be always very, there can be great learning in that, and there can be great understanding as well.
Can I come in there following on?
Absolutely. Yeah, work away, Bill.
I agree fully there with what Mick's saying. I would have been an addiction counsellor and would have worked with families too, and that's the whole philosophy within say Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon, which would be not for the person with the addiction, but for the family members, people around them. So, like in relation to this question now that's been asked, you know, I think they said that the person themselves doesn't think they have a mental health problem. So communication is very important. If you're getting resistance and that person is, their reality is, I don't have a mental health problem, you're just going to piss them off even more. And if you keep going down that road, you make a bad situation worse. You might as well throw petrol on a fire. But just you know what Mick was saying there, you know, it can actually bring up the temperature of the whole family with anxiety and stress, watching this person with the problem who they see isn't doing anything about it. And they forget, well, actually, they don't think they have a problem. So why would they do anything when they don't think they have a problem? But if the family are able to step back, so like if they can step back, certainly tell the person maybe once or twice, but if that's not working, step back and say, well, what are we going to do? What can we do to first of all make sure we're not starting to get affected by this person's problem, and secondly, what can we do to support them in light of the fact that at the minute they don't see that they have a problem. And as long as then that you keep the channels open, that the person is aware that the rest of the family think they might have a problem, and they're there to support it whenever that person, as Mike was saying, the penny might drop and they think, Jesus, maybe they're right. Or maybe someone else will say something to them outside the family, and they'll come back. And like just exactly that scenario, they'll come back and say, geez, you know, I think I might have a mental health problem. I was chatting to Frank down in the shop there. And the family member will be going, bloody hell, did I not say that to him 2 years ago? You know, but it's communication is very important there, and not to allow it to get very resistant and abrasive.
That's really good, Bill. I think what you said there about asking those questions, what can we do to support you, and having that clear, open communication around as well, that's really valuable advice that could help. And having to gain that understanding, like I think Mick, you kind of mentioned as well. So really good. Any final thoughts on that before we move on? Are we all good? So I know we kind of covered some of this already, but and we'll go on to do the meditation after this. Well, this will be, I suppose, nearing the end of it anyway. But have you any advice for those watching who are finding it hard to seek that support and can help them moving forward? So I know we kind of touched on it a little bit, but finding, I suppose, really difficult to reach out or even sign, or I suppose, what would be the first step that someone could do that's watching to help them move in the right direction with their, Mike,
I think just ask for help. And again, because we've all experienced it in the workplace or with friends or anything. And instinctively as human beings, if I was to say to any of the lads here, Ian or Bill, I need a bit of help with this. We'll be able to make time for it. The answer, I can guarantee you, it's always yes. We'll have a look at it. We'll see what we can do. But if I can't help you, we'll try and get someone who can. And that's kind of it. So once you take that, it takes a bit of courage, a little bit of bravery, but I can guarantee you, you'll get the results. You know, and again, if you don't get the immediate, persist. But I think it is just taking that risk and ask for help. And see that if you can come at that and saying asking for help is a strength rather than a weakness. You know, so what's the barrier? The barrier is our own thought process. I'm going to be shamed. I am less than. But if you turn it around, so change the narrative in your brain, you know, and say, no, I need help and I'm asking for help. And I can guarantee you, once you ask the question, you'll get there, you know.
Brilliant. For changing the narrative, Mikey. That's really good. Anyone else additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I agree with Mike. You know, if you get to the point where you can hold your hand up and say, look, I want that support, I want that help. But I think sometimes it's getting us to that point as well. But I think there's I suppose the world we live in nowadays is very different than the world I grew up in. You know, in terms of supports that are there. Now, there's a range of means that people can access support now. It doesn't have to be walking into a room directly face to face with somebody. There's a number of supports and services out there. There's a really good text service, you know, the 50808 text service as a step, and that's designed for younger people. And then there's always our colleagues within the Samaritans, you know, where you can pick up a phone to a complete stranger at 24 hours a day. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can have a conversation with them about anything, any subject, anything. And I think there's a range of different steps that people can take. And there's, you know, we're having this meeting, you know, over Zoom at the moment. There are a range of counselling organisations that do offer stuff over Zoom as well, if you're able to jump in there and have those types of conversations. So there's a range of mediums available to do that once you've made the step that Mike talked about, to say, look, I'm struggling with this, or I'm ready at the moment now to take that step.
Great. Brilliant, Mick. Bill or Ian?
Sorry.
Absolutely. Go on ahead, Bill.
Just on that to say, I think it is more difficult in this day and age because we're more private as in communities. You know, the front doors aren't opened. We lead busier lives, so you know we go from work. Then our entertainment's passive. It's television mostly. You know, so there's very little kind of face-to-face communication, even in family homes or that, or between, you know, next door neighbours and this kind of thing. So it's easier to hide mental health bother like anxiety, stress, and stuff like that. So we kind of lost the art of sharing in a way, like what Mike was talking about. So you know, it does feel difficult, and it is exactly what was said. It's coming mostly from our own kind of thinking and our own. But if we see it as a skill, and like the short discomfort that you feel stepping out of the comfort zone and asking for help, you know, realizing, okay, this uncomfortableness won't last, and it's going to really help me long term to practice that skill of looking for help, because what was said there, you know, no one will ever, very few people refuse help. You know, men in particular love to try to help someone else, you know, because there's a kickback. It makes us feel good about that. So you know, even just to ask for help is a skill. So if I think, oh God, I can't do that, say it, well, hold on, well, I can learn it. You know, I can learn any other skill, so I can learn this, and it has potential great benefits. with regards looking after my mental health.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Bill. Would you be happy enough to move on to the meditation? Then we'll come back to wrap up with additional kind of resource and signposting information. Or Mike, have you any?
Yeah, just one quick thing just on, there's one question there, and again, it's just how does a GBT plus man affect our mental health? And I suppose for me, I suppose I have a number of family members who are not straight, heterosexual, males or females, and again, so anybody. So what is stigma? Stigma means you're marked out as different, but in society, while you're not different, you're perceived as different by the norm. And as a result of that, you can be rejected, you can be abused, you can be challenged, and I've even seen it in my own family where people were rejected by family members, so can you imagine what that felt like for that individual? To be rejected, how that impacted on their mental health. So absolutely, so it becomes, it's an extra layer of a challenge, just even for acceptance. So yeah, and and it gets back into that isolation, people being pushed out, marginalized, bullied, abused, and all the rest of it. And that in itself is a different webinar. But because the question was in it there, I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Perfect.
So yeah, Cillian, go ahead.
Yeah, perfect. If anyone has any thoughts on or additional things to add or anything, are we happy enough?
Very briefly, I would say, again,
thanks, Bill.
That's such a kind of a lot of variables involved there. Like if you look at, say, someone like Graham Norton, it doesn't seem to bother him at all. Where you could get at the other end, you could have someone that's affecting them so much that they might be having thoughts of suicide because of bullying or whatever way it's affecting them. And I think the underlying issues of self-esteem of that are where the person can, that's within their power to say, well, I can't affect how other people are going to see me, but I can. These are within my power to improve this part of it, and by doing this, I can live as who I want to be, much more the way I do, and feel comfortable with it.
That's excellent, Bill. Thanks a million. So we might move on to the meditation like we always do, and the panelists can turn off their camera if they wish. I'm just going to start sharing it there. As we begin this guided meditation, start by sitting in a comfortable posture, closing the eyes and taking a few deep breaths through the nostrils. Imagine yourself faced with a difficult situation. It may be something coming up that is bringing some fear or anxiety, or something you went through in the recent past. Just begin to recognize any fear that is present as you bring this event to mind. It could be something like having a difficult conversation with a friend or a loved one, or having an upcoming appointment that is bringing some worry. Rather than playing out the story in your head, ask yourself what the strongest version of yourself would do and how they would handle it. Picture your strong self handling the situation with complete kindness, care, mindfulness, patience, and wisdom. As you begin to visualize the situation in your head, make that special effort to notice the strength and the resilience within you. Allow yourself to feel strong and confident. When you begin doubting yourself, return back to the strong you. Reconnect with your intentions of wisdom and compassion in the face of these difficulties. You can continue with one experience, playing it through multiple times, or you can also try working with a different situation or event. Continue to connect with the strength you have within you. Remember to breathe deeply and watch for any anxiety and worry. Just realize how much inner strength you have within you, that you are much more resilient day to day, and you're continually building on this strength within yourself. Now slowly bring your attention to your breath and just acknowledge how well you're doing, how proud of yourself you should be, and how much resilient you will become and are becoming each and every day. As we close off this meditation practice, slowly begin to open your eyes again and bring your attention back to the room again. Now, thanks a million for that, everyone. Hopefully you all enjoyed it, and the panelists as well. I'm just going to quickly share some information on upcoming events for Midwest ARIES, and then Bill and Mick, if you have any other additional things that you want to share, that'd be great. I'll just get this up here. So this is our upcoming Midwest ARIES timetable for December. So tomorrow on the 1st of December, we're running our new Creativity for Wellbeing workshop. So that's going to be a great event for anyone that's interested. We've arranged workshops on self-care and exploring and managing anxiety towards the middle of the month as well. So all those workshops can be booked through Eventbrite. So midwestaries.eventbrite.ie. And that's that. Then this is the poster for the Creativity for Wellbeing as well. So again, another great addition to our ongoing workshops as well. And it's great to have something along the lines of creativity. We're looking forward to that one. Again, that can be booked on Eventbrite as well. And then this is just for the social media as well. The Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, all the links are at Midwest ARIES. And then the wellness panel as well, with which will be up. This recording of the webinar will be up on that, as well as our YouTube channel, and that can be accessed on Anchor FM for the podcast, and then Midwest ARIES YouTube channel as well. This is Mental Health Ireland's information. And Bill, if you want to come in on this is just with the website and information as well, or even your own additional resources, that'd be great. So mute there.
Yeah,
perfect.
Thanks, Cillian. I would just say, that the first website or the first link address there takes you to all the resources that we have in Mental Health Ireland. There's great signposting on there too. There are information on national campaigns that may be coming up, or that have just, maybe they're over, but there's still links to videos and things like that up on the website. And other good links. I put up a few links in the chat there at the start, if you go right back to the start, in relation to training for anyone who works with men in group settings or even one-to-one. There's some very good training offered by the HSE through the Men's Health Forum Ireland. And again, the information is up, the links on those as well. And then, I would be involved in Donegal, and I know it's all around the country, as Mick would know there, and would back up the courses on suicide awareness, assist and safe talk, and there's a few other actually there as well, and they're free and through the HSE as well. So if hse.ie, you'd get information on that as well.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Bill. That's brilliant to get those resources. I'm just going to stop the share, and Mick, if you want to come in, and just before you do, I'm just going to put, Mike, you probably put the feedback form in the chat there as well, I'd say. Yeah, that's perfect. If you don't, lovely. And Mick, if you want to just detail any resources yourself, in the work?
Yeah, you know, here in the Midwest, I'm based in Limerick. We cover CHO3, Limerick, Clare, and North Tipperary, and we, like Bill had said, we offer a range of free suicide awareness, suicide prevention trainings, and they all can be accessed. My contact details, I can give them to yourself or Mike, and you can put them all up. You know, it's just a matter of registering for them, and you'll see the timetable of the various different ones that are happening at the different times and that.
Brilliant, Mick. Thanks for
that. There's a range of, some of them are online and some of them are face to face.
Brilliant. And I send out a learner pack anyway to all the people registered for this webinar anyway, so I can attach any additional links or email addresses anyway to people who have registered and attended as well. So that's brilliant. Bill, were you going to come in there?
Yeah, I forgot to mention a plug here up in Donegal. We're having a variety concert on the 26th of January. You're all welcome to come up. There's plenty of accommodation around the place, and it'll be promises to be a night of good entertainment, just like the last hour here now. Good debates, no right or wrongs, just insightful conversation with a bit of music and drama.
That's brilliant. Thanks a million, Bill. Exactly that. And I think we'll finish up. If anyone has any additional thoughts on anything you'd like to add or say goodbye, because we're hitting the 3 o'clock button as well, or Mark. So Mike, do you want to come in there and just give a final few?
Yeah, thanks Cillian for organising that. I know Ian had to go away early there. He had a prior commitment. And and as Cillian said, like, these will go up on the YouTube channel, they'll go up on the podcast channel, and they're there then as a resource for anybody to come along and have a visit at any time. So share that with your friends as well, and colleagues and people you know, and people who you think may benefit. That may be the intervention we were talking about earlier. But great stuff. I think great conversation, interesting when we look at it as a topic. Thanks, Cillian.
Brilliant. Thanks a million. And just thanks to Mick, Bill and Ian as well for coming along and taking the time out to have this discussion as well. It's really important, and the more we do of this, the better it will be for everyone involved anyway. So Mick, were you going to come in there? Sorry. Or no,
yeah, just thanks for the opportunity to have these conversations. And I think, look, they're really important. If they help anybody to take that first step, you know, to seek help. And, you know, look, at my details will be there. If anybody does want to get hold of me or get hold of our office, by all means, we'll welcome any contact.
Brilliant. Thanks a million. We'll leave it there. The feedback form is in the chat again. If anyone wants to open it up and just fill it in, you'll get it in the email anyway that I send after this anyway. But thanks a million, and we'll chat to you again soon. See you later. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.